Good morning, class. I hope you're all well. So, this is lesson 7 of week 4, and the assignment for this week, the slash revision tip, is A. Explain one example of the USA creating an alliance to contain communism, and B. Explain one example of USA using arms technology to contain communism. So, we'll quickly move on to the methods of containment used by the USA. So the Americans believed that communism spread had to be stopped, and the Korean War proved to the Americans that it was not possible for them to just send their troops to war whenever they saw a problem. Containment needed other methods as it was too expensive to send troops to war, yet it never worked out well. So one of the methods that was used by the USA included alliances. This was a network of anti-communist alliances was created around the world. There was the Southeast Asia Treaty, SEATO in Southeast Asia. Then there was the Central Treaty in Central Asia and Middle East. And USA gave money, advice, and arms to these allies. And in return, the leaders of this country suppressed communist influence in their own countries. So, in response to this, USSR accused USA of trying to encircle or to surround the communism world. So, the USA alliances were also seen by USSR as being very aggressive. And in 1955, the Soviet Union set up the Warsaw Pact, which comprised of USSR and all the communist East European countries except for Yugoslavia. So both USA and USSR engaged in arms race. The USA developed atomic bombs in 1945, and after bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan in August 1945, Japan surrendered within a week. This was during the Second World War. So both USSR and USA spent huge sums of money to develop more advanced weapons. The two countries spied on each other to try and steal technological secrets. And USSR used spies such as Rudolf Abel, who worked in New York until his arrest in 1957. USA also used high-tech spying gear, such as the U-2 plane. This was a plane which flew very high, and it could not be shot down, but it captured detailed photos of the ground. For instance, it could read a newspaper from 14 miles up in the sky. So both USSR and USA developed nuclear bombs, which could be launched from submarines, which is naval power, or planes. And USA, for example, placed short-range nuclear weapons in Turkey, which was one of their CENTO allies. And both sides also developed the ICBMs, which traveled from one continent to the other within half an hour. In brief, both USA and USSR used allies, they used nuclear arms race, they used propaganda and spying, all in an effort to exert their influence in the world. USA was working to contain or to stop the further spread of communism, while USSR was trying to spread communism influence in the world. So, the impact of the arms race, we see that the arms race was mostly about quality and more sophisticated weapons. So, the Cold War was more of a propaganda war than a military war, as no actual ever fighting took place. And in the 1950s, the Soviets took the lead in technology, especially in their space program, and each power had to prove that their system was more superior. However, the arms race was also about quantity. For instance, USA was alarmed by the fact that the USSR had many more nuclear missiles than the USA. This was referred to as the missile gap, and it was widely reported in American media in the 1950s. So the missile gap was, however, a myth, and we see that USA boasted of more missiles than USSR, and Khrushchev refused to accept the fact that USA had more missiles than USSR. as it would help his critics in the USSR gain popularity. And on the other hand, we see that American commanders were actually happy with the idea of the missile gap, as it helped them to secure more funding from the government to help them pay for development of more advanced weapons. By the 1960s, Eisenhower also agreed that the missile gap was a myth, as one of his important sources in the Soviet had defected to the USA. During before that, his contact was still in the USSR, and Eisenhower could not agree that he knew the number of missiles that Soviet Union had without disclosing his source. Thus, the USA continued with its own missile production in an attempt to narrow down the missile gap. And by 1961, both superpowers had enough missiles to destroy each other. So, these weapons gave them a sense of security, and we'll find that the nuclear deterrent simply meant that the enemy would not dare attack, as they knew that the other camp would destroy them even before their bombs had landed. And we find that thus having nuclear weapons deterred the other side from attacking first. And this deterrence policy came to be referred to as MAD, which simply meant mutually assured destruction. So no side would thus dare strike first in fear of destruction from the other side. It created fear, though the leaders viewed nuclear weapons as a deterrent. Others were worried that the world was headed to a dangerous time. And for instance, we'll find that there was the American B 47 bomber plane that crashed in Norfolk, England in 1957. So both USA and USSR leaders were secretive, but they could not hide the fact that the nuclear arms race would destroy Europe, USA, and Soviet Union in minutes if a poor decision was made. And fear of the bomb was a common feature in America in the 1950s and the 1960s. And at school, children were actually taught what to do if there was a nuclear attack. So some people protested against the arms race, especially in peace times. For example, we had Oppenheimer, and others were against the large amounts of money that were being spent on weapons production. So people became fearful and helpless, and they thought that this was the end, especially because of nuclear warfare. And Cuba became the next major flashpoint of the Cold War.